Hi everyone, welcome to Module 2. In this module lesson, I'm going to go through how to create a 2x2 table using Excel. So this lesson is primarily aimed at those of you who are very unfamiliar with using Excel, and I'm going to show you how to create a 2x2 table and then use it to calculate your relative risks and odds ratios and other measures of association that you will be learning in this module, just to help you to calculate them for both your learning activities and your quiz questions. So I'm going to turn my camera off and then I'm going to screen share, and then I'll go through the worked examples from your course notes using Excel, and then after this video there's going to be an activity for you to try that out using Excel yourself. So I'll turn my camera off and share my screen. There we go. So this slide you would have seen from your lecture. This is the 2x2 table for when we have two outcomes, disease or no disease, and two outcomes for exposure, being exposed or not exposed. And we use the 2x2 table as a basic way of dividing our population or our study population into 4 groups, and then we're able to calculate our measures of association. So just a reminder of the orientation of the 2x2 table. So we always have disease, no matter what the study design is. Disease in the columns, so disease or no disease, column 1, column 2, and then exposed and then unexposed in your rows. And it's also very important to work out what is exposed. So what the study is describing as an exposure and what is not non-exposure. For example, for this is for vitamin D exposure. So are you looking at low vitamin D as an exposure or high vitamin D exposure? So it's always important to work out what the study aims are and what their hypothesis is. And then we always label A, B, C, D, and this will help us with our calculations. So I've just opened up an Excel sheet. So we're going to use this Excel sheet to create a 2x2 table. I've got here, let's start off first with disease, no disease, exposed, and unexposed. We have A, B, D, and then here we've got A plus B, C plus D. So first of all, we'll go through the calculations for a relative risk, and then the next I'll create a new sheet and we'll do the calculations for an odds ratio. So for when we're looking at incidence and calculating a relative risk, so for a cohort study or a randomized control trial, we work across the rows. So we have our population of interest, they've been exposed or unexposed, and then we're measuring disease outcomes in that study population. So we can measure our incidence in the exposed, so A divided by A plus B, and compare that to our incidence in our unexposed, so C divided by C plus D. So in example 2.1 in your course notes, we look at a hypothetical cohort study. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in here so you can see it. So a hypothetical cohort study conducted with a total of 1,000 participants. So in this course, you will be needing to fill in your 2x2 table based on the information given to you in a scenario. So I'll just show you that now. So let's go EG 2.1. Let's go and have a look at our total here. So in this example, we know that we start with 1,000 participants. So our total is 1,000. 600 of the participants have been exposed to the study factor of interest. So if we go along our exposure, the total exposed are 600. And in this case, 400 of those exposed participants developed the disease of interest. So of those exposed, there's 600 of them and 400 developed the disease of interest. So in the unexposed group, 200 participants developed the disease. So disease and exposed, so cell C is 200. So that's all the information that you're given in this scenario, but you can easily calculate the other cells in the 2x2 table just by subtracting what's left. So here, I'm going to show you how to use the formula function for the first time. So we've got these cells to fill in. This cell here, cell D8, is 1000 minus 600. If we type the equal sign, we can click on the cells. So 1000, which is D9, the minus symbol, minus D7, and press enter. And it gives us 400. So here is the answer in the cell. And at the top here in the function area at the top, you can see what the formula is. So we've told Excel to calculate D9 minus D7. So that's just a simple formula function in Excel. That's all we actually need if it was a cohort study, because we have our disease, so A on A plus B and C on C plus D to be able to calculate our relative risk. So an easy way to do this so you can see the different steps in what you're calculating is to first calculate the risk in each, or the incidence in each of the exposed and unexposed group. So I'll call that incidence here, so it's cumulative incidence, and we want to do 400 divided by 600. So equals, or cell A divided by cell D7 gives us 0.6667. And so we don't have to times or make it into a percentage here, because if we leave it both as a proportion for both the exposed and the unexposed, then the ratios will be fine. So that's our incidence or cumulative incidence in exposed. So 66.7% of the exposed had the disease. And then the same for the unexposed, equals 200 divided by 400 equals 50.5 or 50%. So if we calculate our relative risk, relative risk is the incidence in the exposed, so A on A plus B, so this 60.66, divided by the incidence in the unexposed. So here we can just go equals incidence in the exposed divided by, so the / incidence in the unexposed, equals 1.33. So the relative risk of the disease, or whatever this outcome of interest is in this example population, is 1.33. So 1.3 times higher risk in those exposed compared to those who are unexposed. Our attributable risk is the incidence in the exposed minus the incidence in the unexposed to give us 0.166, so 16%. So that's the attributable risk. Right, so let's go through that again. So in your example 2.2, you're given your 2x2 table. And so I'm just going to cut and paste this across. So this is given to you in the example 2.2 in a 2x2 table already. So if we wanted to calculate our relative risk, attributable risk, and then also our attributable risk percent from a table like this, I would first do our incidence. So you can make your calculations easy. So incidence in exposed equals, so 50 cases of lung cancer divided by 827 people. Same for the unexposed, 8 divided by 7.3. And that's our absolute risk, or our cumulative incidence in exposed and unexposed. Relative risk equals incidence in the exposed divided by incidence in the unexposed. Equals incidence in the exposed minus incidence in the unexposed. A bit bigger. And then we've got our AR percent. So if you look at your course notes or your lecture slides, the attributable risk percent using the incidence in the exposed is the attributable risk, so AR divided by the total incidence in the exposed. So got equals incidence, the attributable risk divided by the incidence in the exposed. Gives us 0.235. Now in Excel, to make that an easy way of making that a percentage, if you go up to the number section up on your ribbon here, there's a percentage. So just click on that and it creates it into a percentage, so 24%. And these two buttons here, you can increase or decrease the decimals. So if you wanted to add a decimal place, you can just click that button. So the answer attributable risk percent here is 23.5%, or 23.5% of the lung cancer cases in those that are exposed can be attributed to the exposure, whatever that exposure is. I think it's probably smoking. And so, so that's attributable risk percent. The other option for attributable risk percent is to use the relative risk formula. So that formula is the relative risk minus 1 divided by the relative risk. So AR percent, I'll show you how to do a bit more of a complicated formula. So we've got equals, and here we want to do the relative risk minus 1. So to do that in a formula, we need to put that into brackets. So open brackets, relative risk minus 1, close brackets. So that is relative risk is cell B19 minus 1 divided by the relative risk. So just click back on that cell again. Oops, there we go. So we've got relative risk minus 1 divided by the relative risk. Press enter, and it should give us the exact same answer, and it does. All right, so there's the 4 calculations for you, and you'll be able to download this Excel sheet and then also use this Excel sheet for you to fill in, so to change this data in here and fill in your own scenarios.